You don't need to be a celebrity to be a podcaster. What you need to be is a storyteller. Someone who thinks in audio because you want to create an experience for your listeners. Like using music to make a point. Or planning the story arc of multiple episodes. Or taking a 2-hour interview and distilling it to 20 minutes of key insights. If this sounds nerdy, well, it is. We talk to experts who can nerd out about a topic, and we get nerdy about production too.
I'm Mark, and I can make people sound like they're in a car,
at a basketball game,
even in outer space.
Carl here. When I'm not working on the business side, sometimes I get to record music for our audio beds.
I'm Pam of the Philippine Daily Inquirer. With Puma Podcast, I dug through 30 years of our archives to write the award-winning True Crime Pod Super Evil.
Ako si Macy. I started out as a junior producer. Now, I produce and host my own show.
Puma Podcast kami. Kayo na rin!
Asia 21, I would say, is a global family of dreamers and thinkers.
Very diverse individuals who are individually quite accomplished.
People that when you meet them, you get inspired by them.
Incredibly smart, but incredibly humble people
that are working on some of the most pressing issues in their respective countries.
Who have a common heartbeat about making this world a better place, not just by their own strength and their talents, but by the ability to work together.
I am Asia 21.
Mama Asia Viseka Sangdane
Na Asia 21.
Asia 21. Ma Asia 21.
我是亚洲20年
私はアジア。
Hi, kamusta na kayo? Ako po si Robbie Alampay ng Puma Podcast. If you're watching this, siguro, we presume, gusto mo rin ng pagbabago. Sino ba namang ayaw sa mas magandang bukas? Pero ang tanong, paano? The late Chito Gascon dedicated his life to defending democracy and human rights. But although many people know him as the chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights, he started his career as basically a very, very young person. If you're watching this, chances are actually that you are probably now about the same age or older than Chito was when he burst onto the national stage as a student leader and then as a youth organizer. Throughout his life, then, he had a strong and abiding faith in reform and in the power of the youth to make it happen. It's in that spirit that 4 organizations have come together: Asia Society Philippines, Puma Podcast, Bukas Conversations for Action, and Youth Leadership for Democracy, or Youth-Led. That's a project of the Asia Foundation and the United States Agency for International Development. You're watching Kung Gusto Mo ng Pagbabago, the Chito Gascon Leadership Series. In each episode of this 5-part series, you'll hear from an experienced change maker who's led the way for their generation, their sectors, their industry, and then a panel to join our speaker from the next generation of leaders who will discuss the challenges we face today. Now, to help to join me in this conversation, let me lead off with Sheila Coronel. She is director of the Stabile Center for Investigative Journalism and the Tony Stabile Professor of Professional Practice at Columbia University in New York. She was one of the co-founders of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, serving as its executive director for many years. She is a Ramon Magsaysay awardee for journalism, one of the first members of the International Consortium for Investigative Journalism, and quite frankly, you don't get as credentialed as a journalist any more than our good friend Sheila Coronel. So let me just start off this conversation. But before that, let me also introduce those who will be joining Sheila in this conversation. We've also invited for the younger set naman, Xyza Bacani, an Asia Society Asia 21 young leader. She's very well known as a photo journalist, a photo documentarist. Then we have Reb Atadero, a theater actor and a TikTok content creator. Kat Ventura is a producer at Puma Podcast. She also produces for One News at Signal TV. And then we'll also have Atom Araullo, a very well-known journalist for the GMA network. So let me start off. This is a question for everyone, honestly. But let me start by posing this question to Sheila. Sheila, 2 sides to this question. How have you experienced, witnessed the power of journalism and storytelling? But at the same time, in terms of that power, in terms of its relevance, in terms of its influence nowadays, what keeps you up at night when it comes to journalism and storytelling?
Well, thank you for inviting me to be here. And with such young people, it's always refreshing to be with people from another generation. So I started out journalism in the 1980s. During the Marcos era, it was a time of information scarcity, and the press was very controlled. There were directives from the presidential palace about what should be on the front pages. We weren't even allowed to show photographs of Imelda Marcos with her double chin. So Ferdinand Marcos always had to be strong. Imelda always had to be beautiful. So my thought was that once we were free, my concept of freedom was that the press would be allowed to publish freely and disseminate information freely. And I've seen, certainly fighting press contributing to the downfall of a dictatorship. I saw that with my own eyes from 1983 up to 1986. I saw the power of an informed citizenry and what an informed citizenry and citizenry informed about the abuses of the dictatorship can do. So that's sort of the journalism tradition that I grew up in. What keeps me up at night is that my whole notion of what constitutes press freedom at a time not of information scarcity, but of information overload, of information abundance, is no longer the withholding of information, but the suppression and manipulation of information by bad actors, troll armies, disinformation armies, a different type of censorship, a different type of media manipulation from what we saw during the Marcos era. No more directives from the presidential palace, literally no more people, there were, early martial law years, there were military censors in newspapers blacking out text from journalists. That's no longer the case. But this time, it's censorship in a much more insidious form in a situation of information abundance.
Oh, let me ask, Atom, I'll ease my way into the younger set dito. Pabata tayo ng pabata. Atom, you're up. Yeah, Atom is the tweener here. We're talking. We want this to be an intergenerational conversation. Atom, not quite a martial law baby, but at the same time, you can stand on your 5 and up credentials in this panel. But can you relate to that? Yung sinasabi ni Sheila, on the one hand, you're an influential figure right now. But at the same time, you know the universe going on all around you, outside of the traditional powers of network television and so on. Influencers that we've never even heard of because we're so not into that space. At the same time, the data dump that is not only overwhelming in itself, but made even more overwhelming and then weaponized by algorithms, organized troll armies, and so on. Anong sense mo, Atom, on the public's control and just ability to wade through all of this content?
Alam mo, in some ways, we are reminded not to take anything for granted because for the longest time, we took it for granted that, the truth trumps lies, di ba? Parang the truth will set us free. It is a guiding light. And if you show somebody the truth, then we'll all be all right. Yung nakakatakot dito, yung democratization ng access to the internet, access to platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Google that has the potential to reach millions of people. A short 5 years ago, people would have said this is a great thing. This will revolutionize the way we talk to each other, the way we relate to our leaders, and so on. But I remember something that Montaigne said, no, that the reverse of truth has 100,000 shapes and a limitless field. So, kung sana yung kasinungalingan madaling baliktarin dahil lang opposite niya katotohanan, mas madaling malaman kung nasaan tayo. Pero dahil sa kapag binaliktad mo yung katotohanan, pwede kang humugot sa kahit saan . Para ang hirap magkaroon ng footing sa ganong klaseng environment. Because even when you try sincerely to have a good conversation, a discussion with people that you meet online, all it takes for them to kind of drown you out is just to say anything, really. To say anything that is the opposite of truth. But people who want to ferret out the truth, among them journalists, among them scientists and historians, they are limited to what the truth affords them. So they have to stick with what is real. And that's a difficult conversation to have. Kapag meron kang somebody who is not interested at arriving at the truth, in a sphere like social media, we've all learned that the advantage heals to them because hindi sila constrained by that kind of by those rules in a sense. So it makes our job all that more harder, all that harder rather. And what keeps me up at night is at this stage, I still don't know what to do with it. Parang it's an ongoing battle, and I feel that marami pa tayong pagdadaanan bago natin maabot kung ano man yung sagot sa problemang ito.
Let me jump straight to Reb, and I'll admit I was really excited to talk to Reb. Reb is many things to his name, but the most important thing for me, I hope you don't mind this, Reb, is his credential as somebody on TikTok. As somebody who's playing that game, who's into that platform. But I guess, Reb, let me take it from your perspective as not a spokesperson, but as somebody of that generation who's comfortable with TikTok. And not just to talk about the platform, but to talk about your generation. Your generation is consuming a lot of content. They're saying even a lot of journalism in TikTok, in a platform like TikTok. And then, of course, everything else goes with that: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. But your generation, what's your sense of confidence that your generation is consuming proper, reliable information and journalism over all of these platforms where you've really chosen to be involved in?
Right. Thank you. By the way, first of all, hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. The thing about being confident enough in the information that you're getting, it also varies. I have to say, it also varies on your, let's face it, on your educational level, and what kind of educational background and what kind of institutions that you learn these from. Like me, for example, I was fortunate enough, and again, this is me checking my own privilege. I was fortunate enough to go to one of the prestigious universities in the Philippines, right? So for me, it was very clear that I would rather believe a website that is a journalism website or a news site, right? Instead of somebody just telling me, o sabi ng lolo ko, sabi ng lola ko nung panahon ng martial law, ganito, ganyan. Right, because I would rather believe somebody that there's an oversight, right, where there's a place that has an oversight over these kinds of information. Now, going over to TikTok, where it is all that's the thing about storytelling. I mean, I'm a theater actor as well, and I've always been in love with stories. It's my job to tell stories, and the thing is, I went onto TikTok to tell these different kinds of stories, and most of them are informative. That's the kind of content that I went for. But on TikTok, since people like me, right, who don't have a journalism background, can just spew whatever I want, right, you cannot account for the responsibility of people who are on it, right? And people who like in my generation and Gen Z, right, we are we kind of grew up in the not kind of we grew up in this information age where you click something and it's there, right? It's readily available. Our attention spans are short. TikTok is great at that because TikTok is limited to a minute to 3 minutes. Not even YouTube. I mean, YouTube can do 10 minutes, something like that, right? But 10 minutes to however long you want, but TikTok is readily available. It's there, it's fast. So that's what makes it that's one of the things that has people at the palm of its hands, right? Everybody goes there for quick entertainment, fun, but most of the time also, especially now during election season, it's misinformation. There's a lot of that going on in there. And finally, to your point, my generation being the whole assertive, like, I want this, right? This is what I want. What's a 9 to 5 again? That's the generation that I, not mocking my generation at all. I do understand that there's a certain level of assertion within my generation. We didn't grow up in conflict. We didn't grow up in war, right? So we have more space to be, what? Why don't we change the wheel? So it is a double-edged sword, right? Because of that level of assertion, you know what you want. Therefore, some minds can also wonder, wait, but what is the truth? So it is. I suppose that's where we are right now.
But very quickly lang, what do you tell somebody like me, somebody like Atom, somebody like Sheila? Because we're very skeptical. We've tried TikTok. I personally don't get it. Sometimes, honestly, I get overwhelmed. I've installed it and uninstalled it all within a space of one day, probably 5 times. And each time, I just feel like I don't have control over this platform, and I don't want to give up on it. But it's almost like I'm giving up. I'm not giving up on TikTok, but I personally, I'm giving up on it. I'm not there. That's not me. I don't communicate that way. At the
Can I,
same time, yeah, go ahead, Sheila.
I just wanted to say that my nieces say only old people fall for this information because they don't know how social media works. Is that true? Are younger people much more discerning about this information because they know how much this social media
Sheila,
can be
yesterday.
manipulated?
Oh, Sheila, yesterday, just very quickly, yesterday I was
Yeah.
speaking with Professor Jonathan Ong. As you know, he's doing these studies on
Yeah.
disinformation in Harvard and University of Massachusetts. Yan din yung tanong ko because 5 years ago, I remember the story was that ang mas nag-share ng fake news are really the titos and the titas.
No,
And
even in the US, it's the older
diba?
people who, yeah.
Oh, but that was 5 years ago. I don't know if that still holds true today.
You know what? I would say while that might be true, and there's evidence for that, not necessarily. I wouldn't say it's limited to the older generation because sometimes when you know how to use social media, it also means you can manipulate social media, right? You can form it into however you want. And again, like you said a while ago, the algorithms, the more you like something, the more you react to something, the more, for example, Facebook is going to show you that, right? So you like this, I'm going to show you more, right? And it is technology is again a double-edged sword because we are always playing catch up to it, right? We always try, we're always 2 steps behind or even more, right? Like for example, you search for a spatula on Google, and all of a sudden when you go on Facebook, there are ads for cookware. You know what I mean? So it works that way. So in a way, it is. I wouldn't say that it's just the older generation also that fall for these things, but it's also the younger generation, and I honestly believe that it is because of this group think thing, right? That every human being has,
It's the
right?
and also the home kitchen bubbles as you mentioned. I want to bring in Xyza, because when I think about your work, your photojournalism, your photo documentaries, and so on, it's almost like it's you'd like to think that it's anti-social media. You take your time, you have time to curate, you have time to really be thoughtful about what do I want to convey with this image or series of images. At the same time, you are also undeniably a product of social media. Your images have been shared because people can feel something in that. So obviously, there's advantage there as well. How do you see your generation, not just as a content creator, but as consumers of 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 stories?
Hi guys. So thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm a product of social media. My career is out of social media. Whatever career that I have, it's from Facebook, unfortunately. I'm not very happy about it, but that's the reality of my career. I posted my photos on social media, someone saw it, and then the story um went from there. So I do think that my generation, the millennials, are still, well, I'm a millennial, older millennial. I'm almost like at the edge of it. So I do think that our generation is more gullible when it comes to fake news. With my own observation, no, because
You
I'm seeing
don't
a
or
lot of
you do? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. You don't or you do?
what I
You
do
don't
think.
think. And you
I
do
do
think.
think
Okay.
that we're
Okay.
more uto-uto when it comes to fake news because we have so many problems that the Gen Xers and the boomers have given us that we were like, okay, let's just believe whatever we see. But I do think that social media is something that one thing that social media has done is truth become negotiable. And I think if you ask me what keeps me up at night, that's what's keep me up at night, because my practice is I seldom call myself a photojournalist because I respect that profession so much, and there's so much ano siya, super para sa akin napakataas ng respeto ko sa work na yon. And sometimes I do street photography. That's not journalism. So I'd rather call myself a documentary photographer, but the ethics of journalism is what I apply to my work. So what I'm seeing is nalalamon yung mga long form documentaries ng social media because everyone have nowadays very short attention span. Like even though you post something that is really important that might affect someone else's lives, or I'm telling a story that na ano na nakakaapekto sa kanila, I when I post it on social media, napapansin ko hindi nababasa eh. Because natatabunan, madaling tabunan sa social media. Ang bilis. That's why as a photographer, I went back to traditional because tradition like printing, books, because in that way, mas nagkakaroon ng shelf life yung story. And there's more chances for people to actually read the story rather than just post it on social media. Like, I think I've done stories na sometimes dismayado ako kasi it doesn't reach the audience that I want to reach because pag post mo ng social media, then suddenly may ginawa si Duterte, wala na. Like, bumahing lang siya. Yun na yung laman ng balita. Eh.
Oh, but on the other hand, are you concerned that... Yeah, but the other side of that is the trade-off to that side is, okay, now by choosing the platform where I want to be and that I understand. So, for example, Puma Podcast. That's why we're in podcasting also feeling ko, okay, this is sort of insulated from the trolls and we don't get as big of an audience as ironically, traditional digital media, but at least we can control the conversation here. And I know I'm hitting the audience that I want, similar to what you're saying. But you can also relate to this. The trade-off there is precisely everybody else that I'm not able to reach.
That's true. In my line of work, impact is really important, and I've proven a lot of times that when I post something on social media, like a story about hunger, people will help. So that's the trade-off. That's a trade-off that I'm willing to take with social media. But I'm pretty sure I can say that I can sleep without Facebook because I'm on Instagram, which is sadly owned by Facebook. So it's more like it's a trade-off that we all must know how to use social media.
Yeah.
That's why this is one of my favorite hobbies lately. When I cannot sleep, I report fake news. Because nowadays, in today's world of misinformation and fake news, I feel like it's my duty as a citizen. It's an act of love for my country to actually report fake news. Like if I know that something's like a fake news, I just do a report and sometimes convince my siblings like, "Hey, can you report this for me because this is not true?" Or like I ask them to like, "Can you ask our father to unlike these pages because it's all fake news?" So in some ways, I try to do my part kahit malayo ako, but I'm very much affected in what's happening in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Kat, ikaw naman swinging the other way. You're still in a traditional broadcasting network like Atom. You're producing content, but at the same time, these networks have had to try to keep up, as Reb and Xyza pointed out. Technology always seems to be 1, 2, 3 steps ahead. You learn Facebook, and all of a sudden, the young people tell you hindi na in ang Facebook. You by the time you probably learn TikTok, then the networks will have been left behind for whatever comes next, and so on. But how does that feel? That on the one hand, you're trying to straddle everything now. You're in traditional broadcast media. At the same time, you know that the game that you need to play in social media.
Thank you again for having me in this conversation. Kasi honestly, parang idol ko lang si Miss Sheila, so thank you. So I'm excited to be here, and that's a very good question. And and I think we did brush upon it a bit kanina when you did mention that your niece po ba? It was your niece who said that it was the older people who didn't know how to use social media. And then we also have Reb kanina who was stereotyping our generation, which I kind of don't mind din naman. Pero tama rin naman yung mga sinasabi mo, but at the same time I'd also want to say no. Hindi naman all the time ganon. So I guess my point is the traditional media doesn't know how to use social media in that sense, because how we treat it and how we produce stories and how we break the news online, it's usually just with art cards, and it's just usually the headlines, kasi we also understand that people won't really read the whole article. So lalagyan lang natin ng caption, lalagyan lang natin ng headlines. And I think that's why yung sinasabi rin ni Xyza kanina na hindi nababasa, hindi nakuha yung full context. It's because they're only reading the first few lines. And because that's also all we're giving them. And then we're just counting on the fact that they're gonna click the link and then they're gonna read the whole article, which doesn't always happen.
Which is not a fact.
It doesn't happen. I think, and I do get that a lot from my friends as well. Parang they would send art cards. As in, it's just usually the art cards kasi it's the visual post na madaling i-share sa mga kaibigan mo. So they would send it to me, sabihin na, tama ba to? Parang, oh my God, nakita mo ba na ito yung nangyari, ganyan, ganyan. Tapos sabihin ko lang, oh nga, pero binasa mo ba? Tapos hindi ko rin sila minsan masisi kasi minsan, yun lang din yung nilagay natin eh. Hindi natin binigay yung full context. So, maybe traditional media, we try to keep up with them, but we also have to understand that we can't, by keeping up with them, we also can't conform them to our standards. We can't keep telling them na, no, this is your duty to read the whole thing. We also have to understand that that's all they're gonna read. And we have to provide more context. Hindi lang yung nakasulat sa text, or kung yun lang yung nakikita natin sa art card, dapat malaman din siya. Kasi it will be so easy to
Pero, but
be misunderstood po.
But same to Xyza's point. Go ahead, Xyza. You want to say something?
Yes.
I'm raising my hand because
Go ahead, Xyza.
You cannot put the whole context in 160 characters.
Definitely not.
And I do think that ang laki ng responsibility ng media, no? I feel like bakit kasalanan ng media? I do think that journalism is doing its job, but then maybe we can blame someone else, like our education system. You know what I mean? Like, instead of blaming because the traditional media is trying to keep up in a way that, okay, how can you tweet the whole context in 160 letters ba? See, I'm not even on Twitter that much. Ang daming troll doon. I avoid Twitter. So, it's 160 and then nagiging clickbait siya because nawawalan ng funding ang media because people are not supporting it the way that they should be supporting it. Kaya nagiging parang, okay, nagiging clickbait siya. The more people click about it, ang natatalo actually, pag hindi click yung buong article, is the journalist who created that story. The publication who published that story. Yun ang talo because it means walang revenue.
Yeah. I mean, and something that you said also, and we'll get into that. I do want to get into about the education system and trying to raise a more information resilient generation. But something that you and Kat also said, that ironically, the more context you try to provide, my sense is paliit ng paliit yung reach mo. On the other hand, you look at TikTok and they have reach, and I see a lot of people trying to use the platform and trying to have the cake and eat it too, in the sense that they can use this platform to provide context. They're trying to use this platform for journalism and get the reach that you have. Reb, is that possible? Is it possible to do to provide more context, is not in 160 characters but in 1 minute? And what have you seen?
No, I don't think it is entirely possible. That's why there are a lot of people do part twos, part threes, part fours, part fives on TikTok because they're short. And I still believe that for you to be able to get the context, you still need some sort of longer form of storytelling. And since Atom is here and I'm a fan, I saw this video of Atom for Vice News, and I think you were shooting it in front of the CCP, and you were talking about the Marcoses, right? And that is to me, right, that gave me more context rather than just 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. But that's the thing, I cannot help but agree with Xyza that it boils down to that educational system. Because if, for example, I saw a TikTok video that's 1 minute claiming that there is some hidden gold somewhere, right? If I were discerning enough and I would think critically about it, I'd go, okay, wait, is that true? Right? This healthy level of skepticism that you have, because really? So now I go search it. I go search it somewhere else, right? But that's the thing. Not a lot of
That's
people
you. Exactly.
yeah,
That's you.
right? Exactly. So to them, it is just, talaga? Uy, narinig mo ba? So it's more about passing on the information rather than checking the information.
Yeah, Sheila,
So
I just want to bring in Sheila before parang, I think one of the reasons why education is such a, we all universally recognize it, di ba? The importance of education. But at the same time, we know it's a long game. We're in a very urgent moment right now where the next elections is really going to be influenced by a lot of misinformation and fake news. So a lot of people are saying, okay, I get that, we'll invest in education. But right now, what can we do? And how do we use these platforms? I'm just wondering, you're exposed, you're not only in Columbia University in New York, you're tied in with ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. You're so involved with so many organizations that have a sense of, not only the shared dilemma we have with journalists and storytellers all over the world, but you're also getting insights on, wow, they're doing this in this country, they're trying this. Have you seen any experiments where you try to get both, the best of both worlds, where you get the context and the values of long form journalism even, while at the same time actually getting the reach that social media can unleash for us?
Well,
Meron
first
ba
of
mga
all,
example?
well, before I go to that, let me just say, education is a problem, but I think we should also think about algorithmic censorship. It's the social media platforms are responsible for creating a toxic media space, for providing
Absolutely.
incentives for disinformation and shareable news and fake news, right? So the responsibility is on, a lot of the responsibility falls on these platforms. Education, and they're preying on long-standing, what we can call pre-existing conditions in our society. Education, polarization, democratic erosion. I don't think that we should blame, it's like blaming the victim here, because I see people are victims of algorithms that have been created elsewhere, over which they have no agency, right? So it's not education so much that I put the blame on. I put the blame on social media companies that are profiting from a toxic information landscape. But yes, I've seen experiments, and not just experiments, but really very successful efforts to educate in different ways, not in the traditional ways we call news. But for example, documentaries are having a golden moment right now. Using feature films as a method for educating people about what's really going on is podcasts are also having a moment. Serialized podcasts that explain and are immersive and engaging and appeal to a broader audience, and not just in the US or in places where English is spoken, but all around the world. So the internet is also providing certain affordances or certain platforms that allow for more deeper engagement with issues. And we put an inordinate amount of attention on TikTok, but we don't really know what how impactful TikTok is, because it's also very fleeting. I think long form engaging journalism that compels people to think and even to act may have in the long term much more impact than this short videos that inform, entertain, and impart.
But then Sheila, how do you take this moment? Diba? I mean, I get what you're saying. In the long run, magwawagi rin to. In the long run, our values will shine through. But how do you take?
I'm not sure in the long run our
moment?
values will. I mean, it could very well be it's the end of civilization, right? With the birth of Facebook in 2006 being the start of the beginning of that end. I'm not sure that civilized discourse is good, but I think everybody is now realizing that democracy is at stake. If we have an information space that's full of disinformation, and I think what we need to claim is the sense of agency, and are thinking that there's nothing that can be done because all of us are information providers and consumers now, right? Will we let algorithms defeat us, or will we? I've been there. I've been, I'm thinking now, and we're having this conversation. What do I prefer? Censorship by a dictator who tells you, or censorship by algorithm? But in both cases, we've seen the power of people power. People saying, we won't take the bullshit anymore. Our lives, the future of our children, the future of our country is at stake, and we're going to take action. So I still have faith in that. My faith is not that social media platforms are going to reform themselves. My faith lies in, an informed and empowered citizenry and a recovery of the sense of agency, which I think we've all lost.
Atom, where does your faith lie?
I've been listening to everyone speaking. I actually have a lot of thoughts, and I'm learning obviously a lot of things, but siguro the first thing I will say is there's really no space to lose hope. I mean, we know that, and for journalists, for example, even if you're faced with the challenge of a smaller audience, let's just say, if you're producing work that is not as consumable as as a minute and a half or 10-second TikTok video, for that matter, or a graphics card. So we continue to push on that front, cognizant that these changes might not happen quickly, not in a year, not in 5 years, maybe not even in 10 years. If we look back at history, there have been moments where it's also an ebb and flow. For example, when civilization, let's just say, descended into a more primitive version of getting the truth, no. Before the age of enlightenment, it was a long time that people were in that kind of situation, and it took years. It took 100 years before a different way of looking at society took over. So there's no reason to say that parang this is it. Everything at the stake. For example, in this election, it might well be that this is just the beginning of a longer struggle, and that this is just one of the battles in a longer war. But I want to say also that if we're looking at something to blame here, syempre there are a lot of. I absolutely agree with Sheila about the responsibility of social media platforms, and also the shortcomings of our current educational system, which, by the way, is controlled by people in power. So there's something to say about that. But I think also we have to remember that information and education is not an enterprise. It's not a profit-making enterprise. It shouldn't be. And I think that many of the ways that we get our information nowadays is driven by profit. You have corporate media, you have private education, for example, even the social media platforms, they're primarily driven by profit, by clicks, right? So parang in that kind of space, it's really easy to drown out information that is more nuanced, that takes more time to digest, and so on. Kaya nga kahit yung mga educational institutions, they're having a hard time because there's no funding. Kasi parang people want to, for example, in UP, we have to fight for the budget year after year because the prevailing idea that I just want to finish 4 years of college, get a job, and then earn is more powerful than say we have to invest in sciences and engineering, even if it doesn't make money right now. It contributes to a scientific way of thinking for the entire for the Philippines, and also industrialization and so on. Pero parang since most of our sources of information or streams of information are driven by clicks, driven by ratings, driven by profit, I think that is a major source of distortion in terms of how we perceive the world.
Okay. Question for everyone. One of the inspirations for this series was Chito Gascon's favorite parable of the stone cutter. Diba? Sabi niya, you keep pounding the rock and eventually it will crack. And when it does crack, it's not the last strike. It's all the strikes. And he said specifically, all the strikes, whether that was struck in a moment of frustration or in a moment of victory. If these elections turn out to be a moment of frustration, and we eventually have a government that was really largely a product of fake news and misinformation, in the short term, in the long term, what's our takeaway from that as journalists and storytellers?
So I've been there. What you do is you are still you're still witness to history. And maybe it's the Dark Ages, but you're one of the monks making these illuminated manuscripts, preserving the knowledge for the future, witnessing and recording history, so that when all of this is over and someone searches through the rubble, they will find those scraps of truth, that they will be able to know what happened, and at some point there will be accountability.
If I may jump in, as an artist myself, I cannot help but agree wholeheartedly. You tell stories because somebody in the future might benefit from it. That's the point of history, right? A lot of people keep saying past is past, and I hate that. I hate hearing that. The past is past, and if you don't look at the past, you're gonna repeat the exact same thing that you did in the past. Right. So it's imperative that even if this turns out to be a moment of frustration among the us or the Filipino nation, or even if it does turn out that way, it's still our duty. It's still our duty to tell the stories that will remind people of what happened, how it happened, why it happened, and more importantly, spark something in their minds to make them think, okay, that happened. How do I prevent it? So it's to provoke that idea, and it is it doesn't stop. It's never gonna stop. I don't think it should ever stop either. Not even the Nazis could do that. So yeah.
Oh my God, another 6 years?
Baka longer.
But I get it, di ba? I get it na, hindi, no? I mean, look at America. It's hundreds of years old democracy, Republican democracy, and they go through, I mean, as recently as last year, go through something so bizarre and really something that, you never thought would happen. But it's the same product of the same problems. Di ba? Kat, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think maybe it's my youth, but I guess the optimistic answer is just keep trying, try harder the next time. I just remember in 2019 when, the Ocho Derecho had a hard time getting into the Senate. And now parang we think about their campaign strategy, like what were they not able to do? And I think we are taking steps to try to change or try to adapt to the voters as well to see what will work and what we haven't tried. And so I guess going back to the platform, kanina, I was just thinking about it. My point wasn't that we should um, put in all of the information in 140 characters in Twitter. I just think we have to. I just think we have to think of a different way to approach social media instead of just using it as a platform to push other articles. Maybe social media is just social. Maybe we should use it to have conversations because tama po yung mga sinasabi rin natin and yung realizations ni Sheila and ni Atom na surprisingly people want explainers. Surprisingly people do like documentaries. We've seen that in Teka Teka when we launched the Teka Teka News podcast. We tried to keep it under 5 minutes. But then the feedback from people was we wanted more. Like don't keep it under 5. And so that actually gave birth to Teka Teka Explains. And now we have a podcast that's 15 to 20 minutes long. And it's a podcast explainer because I think people are looking for conversations. And I did mention, I think nakwento ko na rin to kay Sir Robbie one time na after the KDP forum debate, I think a lot of me and other people were looking for conversations. On Twitter, I wasn't looking for the highlights that came out of that debate. I was looking for a Twitter space where I could talk to Karen Davila and hear what she has to say as a moderator of that debate. And there was an available platform for it. And I was listening to other strangers, them giving their 2 cents on what was happening. So I think the media, traditional and the new media, we still have time to adapt. We just have to see this in a different way. Don't just use the platform to release quick videos or graphics. Maybe we should give people more chance to also have their voices be heard and listen to them and also talk to them and have that conversation. So
Xyza, si Kat brought up a very good word, diba? Conversation. People are hungry for conversation. I imagine the work that you do spurs a lot of conversations. But can you talk to that a bit also about something that you said that I don't need to have this conversation with 1 million Filipinos at the same time. I'm not a traditional news website and so on. But if 10,000 people buy my book, there's real conversations going on around that.
Oh yeah. I do think that conversation is necessary, especially nowadays. And I do think that as storytellers, as journalists, we have the responsibility to actually listen, not just hear them. Because there's two types of conversation. One is you're actually listening to them, like genuinely listening to them, and the other ones you're just hearing them. And I do think that that's one thing that has been lacking lately, having that type of conversation where it's talagang you sit down with each other and talk. And with social media, I think Atom mentioned it a while ago, it's so easy to even on emails, if someone accidentally used like an exclamation point, ang iisipin nung receiver, ay ba't galit, right? So it's so easy to lose that type of flow when having conversation on social media. And I don't know, I'm still very traditional because of the way I do my stuff, my things. But I do think that that we need to have an actual conversation with people. Don't just have a conversation with people who agree with your opinions.
Yeah.
You have to have a conversation with the security guard. You have to have a conversation with the tricycle driver. I mean, I've done that in the Philippines. I've been drinking Ginebra with people that I don't even know. And I hate gin. You know what I mean? Just to have that kind of one-on-one conversation because I live in a place where everyone believes that this person should lead the country because during the martial law, it was golden.
Yeah.
And then when you ask them, when you actually listen to the reasons, sometimes it's personal for them.
Oh, pero
You know, like
sa
a bit,
pagbisa kasi nakakapagod. The last time, in the first episode of Kung Gusto Mo na Pagbabago, we were speaking with advocates, activists. Ted Te was our speaker. But I also asked Ros Tugade, who's also a human rights lawyer, because what she did for her own presidential candidate, she went home to Ilocos, or Cagayan, basta Region 1. She went home there and then she conducted a free legal clinic. Dahil sabi niya, ito yung ambag ko. But the question I had was, sige, what did you learn? And she said the exact same thing. You need to have conversations with people. But same reaction that I have now is, pinakakapagod naman yun. Yung isang kampo. Di ba? The Marcoses are using trolls. They're paying the algorithms. They're paying influencers. And all I can do is to have, I have no doubt it changes minds. But it changes minds one by one. I get a feeling like, oh my God, parang, ano yung pag-asa ko dito if one of my biggest takeaways is that we're gonna have to do this one by one. We're gonna have to have real conversation. In the meantime, people are gaming the game.
I do think that we need to go back to what Chito Gascon have said and Sheila and Atom has mentioned a while ago. We don't stop. Yes, it's tiring, but we don't stop. You keep pounding it and pounding it and pounding it until you get your points across, your message across. Because you know what? If you change one's you isang tao, I believe in this because I don't want to lose faith in humanity. If you change one person's mindset, that person started a ripple.
Okay, so we don't need to learn. So Sheila, Atom, everyone. So we don't need to learn TikTok. TikTok as a metaphor for every new, or as a stand-in for whatever comes next, for whatever is the big setup. We don't need to learn that. Go ahead.
If I may lang, no, about I cannot help but nod along with what everybody is saying. It is true. I've tried it. One-on-one conversations. I've tried it. I've done live streams where people just talk to me, where people just go, okay, so why are you voting for this candidate? And it's funny because you get it in different gradients. The first gradient is somebody who is like a turtle. Like, no, this is my shell. Your facts don't matter. Do your own research, kid. I get that. That's the first kind. The second kind is the undecided, right? And it's like, okay, so why? People who genuinely ask me why. And then I give them answers. And then sometimes they counter the answers and they go back. Then, bakit ito yung narinig ko about this person? And then I go, well, you can do your, you can also cross-check your references, right? You don't only need one news source, right? You can look at other news sources. And if they're all saying the same thing, then maybe there's a grain of truth to it, right? So, so that's the second level. The third level are the totally apathetic ones. They're like, they're all thieves. Whatever. Right? I don't care. They're all thieves.
Wala namang perfectong kandidato.
Exactly. Right. So, and they're the kinds of people where I go, okay, this is the next 6 years of your life. You have to, if you don't want to be involved, at least, have some respect that it is an issue that needs to be talked about, needs to be discussed. Right. So you get different gradients. And again, going back to those individual conversations, I swear to God, I had a conversation with a person and his only reason for voting is to satisfy his curiosity. Right. That he's not his father's son. What are you saying? Right. That's what he was trying to say.
I know people who voted that way for Duterte.
Yeah.
Who basically said this is at best they will say, I feel this is a risk worth taking.
Yeah,
at the same time, people said that let's just try something new.
Yep, absolutely. There are people who are like that. And I remember that person ended that conversation with me by going, 6 years lang naman yan ang buhay mo eh. Pagbala, di palitan natin. And as unbelievable as it was, as nagdudugo na yung lower lip ko, I was biting my lip. I was trying to keep calm. Xyza and Kat, everybody here, they're right. You don't stop. Yes, you don't keep pounding it. But that's the thing. Social media has made it, for some reason, social media has made us all very courageous and brave in voicing out what we want to say. But at the same time, it's made us so defensive about our own stances. Because you've put it out in the world, mapapahiya ka na kapag binawi mo. Right? It's a pride game all of a sudden. You can, that's the thing. You can say what you want, but people kind of don't like their ideas being challenged in an exponential scale now, because there are audiences. We are audiences of each other, right? So it is very rare for somebody to actually about face and go, "My bad, I'm accountable." Right? And sometimes the best you get is a half-assed apology, a non-apology apology. Right? So that's what's happening right now. And yes, I absolutely believe that, Miss Sheila, I absolutely believe that these social media companies, yes, they are also to blame, because everything is a react button, right? That's it. That's how they gain traction. Yeah. Oh, this post has, no matter how many people say this is fake, this is fake, this is fake, it's still being pushed to our five senses, because and it's emotional, right?
Yeah.
So that's what happened. That's what's happening.
Let me jump in only because we're running out of time. But one quick question muna kay Sheila before I throw this my final question to everyone. Sheila, yesterday I asked Jonathan Ong also this question because inevitably the platforms always come up. Diba? The platforms have to be more transparent. They have to be more accountable. They have to be accountable not just to us but to democracy all over the world. This is precisely also Maria Resa's message. But we're always told that the wisdom also is you worry about what you can control. And so I asked Jonathan, and I'm asking you right now, very quickly lang, where do we categorize the platforms? Where do we categorize social media? Is that something that we tell ourselves, I have control over how they're going to behave? Or is that something that's actually beyond our control?
I think there are many changes now happening in terms of regulating social media in Europe, in the US, and that is because of what is happening in countries like the Philippines or Myanmar or elsewhere. So I think it all contributes to increasing pressure on the social media companies to do something. But then it's very difficult because you're basically asking them to change their revenue model, basically asking them to give up the way they make profits. But we do have agency over what we consume on social media and what we post on social media and what we believe and what we share on social media. And I think if we take individual responsibility, that's one step forward. And if we take pains like Xyza does to correct, to engage, or like what Reb does, to engage people in recreating a public sphere in this wilderness, then maybe it's possible, but it takes a lot of effort. And this is the problem, because we don't have no power to automate. We have no incentives. We don't own the business. The algorithms we don't control, but there are certain things we can control, and those things we can act on.
Okay. And so my final question to all of you, as we said, going back to the whole rationale behind the Chito Gascon Leadership Series, it's an intergenerational conversation of what it took, what it is taking, and what it will take to effect change. And my question to everyone is, what do you say your generation can and should learn from the other generations, whether these are older generations than you or the younger generations than you, as represented in this panel?
I suppose I can go first here. From the older generation, I think the best thing that we can learn from them is to take it slow. To actually look deeper into things, and like for example, before, like what Miss Sheila was saying and what Kat was saying, you take the time to click, right? Click on that link and actually read what it's about, gain context, right? That is something that we can learn, like taking it slow, and the gratification of likes and reacts. It is not gonna mean anything down the line. It's not. For the younger because there is a generation that's younger than the millennials now, which is the Gen Z. What I like about the Gen Z is that they are very courageous to call out something when it's wrong. They're very courageous to challenge norms in society, right? So I suppose these are things that we can all marry and find solutions that way, so that we don't get drowned out into this whole oh my God, it's a tidal wave of information that we don't know, right? We don't know what information to take. We don't know anymore. We don't know which establishments to challenge anymore. So it is. I think it's that. It's to take it slow and be inquisitive, be skeptical, be courageous, and don't be afraid to fight these systems of oppression that you see.
Xyza?
If there's one thing I could learn from the, you know, my elders, not to repeat their mistake. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. To lighten things out. But this is such a heavy conversation to have before midnight. I want to sleep later. So I do think that if there's one thing that I can learn from my past generation, from our ancestors, is having having more patience. As Rem has been saying, patience is something that's been slowly losing its value lately because we just want the instant gratification, and to be patient and to actually get out of your comfort zone and get out there, have a conversation with someone. And I do think that nowadays we're in a box, we're living in a box, laptop, iPhone, computer, whatever. So if there's one thing I could learn from them is the fact that they went out there, they had conversation with people, they did their job, and they keep pounding until now. So I want to have that, and I want to learn that. Yeah.
Kat?
Okay, I think if there's one thing I can learn from the veteran journalists, it's to never stop questioning. And this doesn't just go. This is not just for younger journalists like me. It's for everyone. And just don't stop questioning. Keep asking the questions, because I think our generation, we are fed this information, and we are fed with misinformation. So don't settle with what they're feeding you. Just keep pounding the rock. Keep asking questions. And I think that's what toppled dictators before. And I think that's why kayo po, you're still here, because you continue to ask questions and you're encouraging us to ask questions. So,
Okay. Atom, you belong to the generation that's supposed to answer this, that what I learned from the younger generation.
I was going to ask saan ba ako dito? Doon sa mga matanda o sa mga bata? You know, I think I want to answer that question by saying that the worst thing that can happen is that we're going around in circles. We always say that these are struggles that we have experienced before. Maybe 10 or 20 years ago, it was the EDSA pricing. I'm talking about EDSA 2, and then before that, there was the first EDSA pricing. So parang ang tanong dito is, bakit paulit-ulit lang ba nangyayari ito? Tsaka inevitable ba na every few years or every few decades nagkakaroon ng cycle at renewal ng mga bagay na naiwaksi na natin dati? So I think it's very important to ask the question, and I think a lot of the older generation really ask this is, what are we doing wrong? And why, how has democracy in its current form failed people to the extent that they are susceptible to empty promises and to the return of authoritarianism? It's difficult to have that conversation with people, lalo na sa social media. I always try to remind myself, these people are the symptoms of the problem and not the problem itself. Although there are some fascists who don't know they're fascist until the time comes, no? May mga ganun din naman. But at the same time, my biggest concern is that we have a more, I guess, a wider understanding of the way society works and the forces that are pushing history in one direction or the other, so that we are not caught up in just focusing on this moment and thinking that all of our problems, were born 5 or 10 years ago when social media came about, right? Ang fake news naman, I don't think that's the main problem. I think that's also symptomatic of a deeper problem that we're all facing. And then maybe just to end, I think it's good to remind everyone, especially this is the mantra of underdogs, na parang try again, fail better. Di ba? If it doesn't work out this time around, you just continue doing it until there's some breakthrough.
Sheila, what can martial law babies and boomers in general learn from this current generation that are of course very generous in acknowledging what they're learning and taking away from your inspiration?
I think the ease with technology, and please figure out how this technology can be used for the good of democracy and of humanity. I think the younger generation is also much more aware of the urgency of addressing the future of the planet, the fact that we are in real crisis, that they will inherit all of these problems. I wish them luck. But I think they're much more aware of those issues than we are. I kind of think we are so obsessed with politics, we're not thinking of other dangers, and young people are very aware of that. The dangers to the environment, the dangers to which comes along with danger of war, conflict, etc. So I also don't think we're on the verge of a technological Armageddon. I think the younger next generation will figure it out. Just as we figured out how to avert nuclear war, maybe we will figure out how to avert a social media apocalypse. You will figure out, I hope, how we'll avert a social media apocalypse. Yeah. So I wish you luck, and may you have energy and faith.
Speaking of energy, and
I
I'll
love
use
how
this to
that
wrap
was
up.
said. I love that.
Speaking of energy, and I'll use this by way of wrapping this up. Yung sinabi kanina ni Xyza that one thing we can learn from the older generation is patience and taking your time. Natatawa ako because I can reassure you that when Sheila was reporting on Marcos, and when she was reporting, or when PCIJ was reporting on Joseph Estrada, and covering all of these different crises, and not only covering, but really being so crucial to letting people decide what they want to do. I don't think Sheila was driven by patience. I don't think that generation. The reality is that generation was at that moment when they were the millennials, when we were the ones in the streets, when we were the ones entering the field for the first time. Everybody had a sense of urgency also, and impatience. No, we want the change now. We want the change now. But I think that's the whole virtue of having an intergenerational conversation. It's a reminder to the young people that the old people were young once. We know how it feels. And at the same time, a reminder from the older generation to the young generation na tatanda rin kayo. and you will learn to deal with a lot of frustrations. It will not all be moments of victory. There will be a lot of moments of frustration, perhaps more in between those moments of victory. And that's part of the legacy and the lessons that we learned from Chito Gascon, who was pounding away until literally until we said goodbye to him. But everything, hopefully, here in conversations such as this, connect all of us, connect us across generations, not just with shared problems, but also with shared dreams, shared aspirations. Hopefully, we're getting shared inspiration from each other as well. So maraming salamat to our elders, Sheila Coronel and Atom Araullo, elders plural. And also, really thank you also to the younger generation, represented here by Reb, Xyza, and Kat. We are inspired as well, and the older generation also feels like we must have done something right also. We really pound ourselves and beat ourselves up when we look at the moment, but when we look at the people, we really should also tell ourselves, well, we must have done something right. Okay, so again, thank you to everyone on our panel and everyone who is watching. If you found this useful, share it with a friend. Please share this with a friend. Abangan ang susunod na episode ng Kung Gusto Mo ng Pagbabago, the Chito Gascon Leadership Series. The highlights of our last episode with Attorney Ted Te are now available in podcast form on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Just search for Kung Gusto Mo ng Pagbabago. Maraming salamat ulit sa Asia Society Philippines, Puma Podcast, Bukas Conversations for Action, and Youth Leadership for Democracy or Youth-Led, a project of the Asia Foundation with USAID. Muli, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.